And we are live. What's going on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn Live? It is your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Tuesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And since it is Tuesday, and you can see, as you can see on the screen, it is time for another The Men's Circle. Man, I can't tell you how much I look forward to these men's circles because they are very therapeutic. And tonight's, funny saying therapeutic, but tonight's topic is going to be very much on that. So tonight's topic on the men's circle is going to be pressure, support, and therapy. As always, I like to share what I mean by my topic. So the topic pressure, support, and therapy really is kind of like this threefold topic. It is the topic of the pressure that we find ourselves under as men, the support that we kind of need to either alleviate or get through those moments of pressure and pressure buildup, and then the additional support that we might need in the aspects of therapy when it comes to the pressures that we're under as men. So tonight we do have a couple new faces. We got some familiar faces and new faces, but some new faces. I would love for everybody to take a brief moment to introduce themselves, and I'll start with you, Bruce, because you're on my left. You're muted, Bruce. I just unmuted you. You're good.
Okay. Well, good evening. I'm unmuted. I'm Bruce Gatewood. Happy to be back, bro. Thank you for having me again. I look forward to gaining not only the perspective of all you gentlemen, but also just some insight and some tools to take with me. So I'm really grateful to be here.
All right. Appreciate having you again, as always, faithful. Brian, you're on my right. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Brian Smith. I'm the newbie to the group this week. Billy and I are actually first cousins. We obviously go way back, and in terms of his social media presence, I remember when he was doing his Wednesday words in the backyard in the early days. But I've been a staunch supporter of Billy since day one. I've been looking at and watching these men's circles the first couple of weeks. I find them enlightening. I think there's a space for men to have these conversations. I can tell you outside of this space today, I haven't had these conversations about pressure, support, and therapy. So I'm looking forward to engaging with everyone about the topics.
Groovio. Appreciate having you, cousin. Rico, you are next. Calling Rico. There you go.
I'm Rico. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Jeremiah Rico Ramirez calls me Rico. Yeah, just not a new face, been here a couple of times, but definitely a pleasure to always come back and be able to share. As you gentlemen said, learning in different perspectives of men, and we get to actually explore some things that we don't get to talk about, or feel free to talk about in those, in those spaces elsewhere outside of here. So yep, happy to be back, and looking forward to getting to know everyone better.
Definitely. I'm always happy to have you here, Rico. It looks like we got a new face here. Coach Cam, if you could come off and introduce yourself.
Hey, what's up? Hey, so I'm Coach Cameron Macias, husband, father to 5, currently active military, only 4 short years left, and just happy to be here, have these conversations, speaking to my fellow men, and that's what I'm here for.
All right. Welcome, man. I appreciate you joining tonight, brother. Then looks like we got you, G Money. Glenn.
What's going on, guys? Hey, I am excited to be back on the men's circle. I appreciate the invite back, Ro. Just having this platform to be able to come in as a student of manhood, to be able to listen, and then also just to kind of provide any value, man. I'm excited about the topic itself because this is not something that's talked about enough.
And definitely last but not least, what's going on, Brother Tim, if you could jump in.
Tim Rushing, husband of 1, thank God, father of 4. I I go way back with Billy to first grade, 35 plus years. I'm going to start doing this little thing. I'm going to start sharing a little funny nugget of support outside of the first row with Billy every time we do this. I even supported Billy when I encouraged him to race somebody going backwards down my street and he crashed into my grandma's fence. I didn't rat him out, and I repaired my grandma's fence. My grandmother lived right next door to me. So I go that far back with him. So look forward to those in the coming weeks, little nuggets of Billy.
Yes. Appreciate that. Thanks, Sam. No, I definitely remember the crease my car had in it from hitting my grandma's fence. So with that, let's jump into tonight's topic: pressure, support, and therapy. Like I said, I always like to kind of talk about the aspect of the conversation and where it's kind of like what it means to me, but I also think kind of where this originated from. What I've actually noticed as I've spent time with the men's circle is the more that I've engaged in the men's circle in these types of conversations, the more I've felt like things that were at the surface that I didn't know were there. They were kind of in the background. They're now arising to the surface. And it's like these issues in life that I have to deal with. And so there's a lot of pressure. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on me from work, from family, from just life in general. But the fact that I'm under that pressure, I'm finding that it's really important to alleviate that pressure because it doesn't go away. And so like I've thought about the times since I've been doing the men's circle, the tears that have just randomly come out when I'm voicing something, or just like sometimes the exhaustion, like mental exhaustion, like being sleepy and just having to sleep. That pressure is always there. It's always present. And so when you take these moments to actually spend time recognizing and acknowledging those pressures, you immediately find that you're not going to be able to alleviate all pressure on your own. So that's where the support and the therapy came in. But I definitely would love, anybody can jump in. Actually, matter of fact, Cam, I'm gonna have you go first because you're new to the joint and you do a podcast, so you can go first. I definitely want to know, when you heard about this topic, pressure, support, and therapy, what jumped out to you about it, and what immediately came to your mind about pressure, support, and therapy?
So for those that I speak to on a normal basis, I'm very big on like talking about something. I'm not, on one of our podcasts when we actually talked to Rico, was one of the things I talked about is that as a man and growing up, I was raised by a single mother, and I never felt as though my emotions were stifled. And so I've brought that into adulthood. So, me and G, for instance, like we had a conversation the week before last because I was upset about something. I was like, I got to get this off my chest. And so I'm very big on like, I have to have a support circle around me that I can talk to. And as I've gotten older, I've realized if I don't feel as though you are one of those people, then you go into like another category of acquaintance. Like if you're not someone who I communicate with and I feel comfortable communicating my feelings, my future desires, all that stuff with, and if I ever feel as though I am holding my tongue because of the person you are, then you are not a part of my support circle now. Like you're not a part of my therapy circle in this instance, because I have a lot of pressure on my life. Like you talked about, I'm a father, I'm a husband, active duty military member. My workload just quadrupled because someone left and we haven't replaced them yet. And so, on any given day, I don't need anything that is adding to the pressure. I need things that alleviate it. And so I love this topic. This is something, honestly, I probably talk about on a daily basis, especially with my wife, because we're both military. We both got jobs. We got the 5 kids. I'm a business owner. She's trying to be a business owner. So this is an everyday conversation in my house, honestly.
I love it. We're gonna move up to you, Brian Cuzza. We're gonna move up to you. What comes to your mind when you think about this topic?
So I can tell you, when you reached out to me about this topic, I got anxiety right off the bat, because this isn't a space I live in, right? I don't have that circle of support. A lot of it has just come from within. I got the same pressures that you guys have. I have worked for a while, for 14 years. We had a single income home, and that was just me, right? So it was work, 5 kids, ranging from almost 37 to 11. So there's some dynamics there. The 3 youngest are girls. So, having 2 boys early and having to interact with them in a different way that I had to interact with my 3 girls now is a little different. But what I can tell you, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little later, is that number one, I'm happy that I can actually have this conversation now, right? Because I haven't had an opportunity to have a conversation about this before. But I can tell you, I, my girls put me in a better place, right? Because having a relationship with my boys is one thing, and interacting with them is one thing. I don't have to be extremely supportive, right? I don't have to be emotional with them. But then your girls have a tendency to show you a different side of you, right? And then that evolution starts with the girls. So, but I can tell you, when I first saw this topic and you first reached out to me, I said, "Oh shoot, do I want to engage in this?" But it did give me a little anxiety.
Do I really want to be a part of that conversation? I don't want to wait. What's going on, Ed? But yeah, no, I definitely get that. And you said something, and we're going to come back to this because you said, with boys, we feel like we don't have to be as emotional as we are with girls. And I'm going to challenge you on that later, just so be prepared. Just breathe and be prepared for that, because I think that is kind of the reason where I am where I am, because I was always, be tough, toughen up, suck it up.
Hmm.
You ain't hurt, or you want me to give you something to cry about. Like, those were the two main ones. And so I think that I'm currently reading this book. It's called, I think it's How to Raise an Emotionally Intelligent Child. And it talks about like the scope of emotions and how, as parents, sometimes we move into these spaces of dismissing a child's emotions just because they're a child, not boy or girl, doesn't matter, just because they're a child, versus being able to have conversations with them and helping them process emotions and guiding them through how to interact with emotions and how to move forward even in the midst of negative emotions, but not necessarily ignoring them. And so we'll unpack up a little more about that later. But definitely, I'm looking forward to having you. I look forward to cousin to having conversations with you outside of the first row. So I'm looking forward to having you here tonight. I just muted myself. I meant to say anybody else now can go, because I got the 2 new people on. So anybody else can jump in now.
I'll go. When I thought about this topic, it brought up a lot of different thoughts and emotions, really. Pressure is always there, right? I've been married to my wife for 20 years. We have 2 children. Matter of fact, my oldest child just bought a car, her first car, and bought a train ticket, and she's in LA right now on her first trip by herself. And I don't even know how to feel about that. Like, I know we raised her right. We know that we armed her with the tools to do this, but man, my heart feels weird. You know what I mean? So pressure is always there. And then having the correct support system and for me, it's now being able to vocalize confidently with intent. This is what I need in order to support me now, right? Because the support I needed 10 days ago, 10 months ago, 2 years ago, that's not what I need now. I'm a different person, right? So coming to grips with that on a personal level, and then being able to articulate that out to the people that matter, right? And I like what is it, Cam? Is it Cam? What Cam said? If I can't speak to you intentionally and direct, I'm so big on direct communication, right? Like, if we can't have those kinds of conversations, are you being supportive, or are you part of the reason why I need therapy? You know what I mean? So it's coming to grips with those actual needs for myself, and then just being able to say it out loud. And then, therapy, this is therapy, right? So what is therapy to you? For me, it's going to the gun range. It's, going golfing, fishing, things of that nature. But this also is therapy, being able to have a space where we as men feel like, hey, it's okay for me to feel this way. Oh, shit, oh, snap. You feel the same way too. I'm not alone in this situation. So I think that's another reason why the men's circle is so important, because every time I leave, I take away so many gems with me that are helping me become who I want to be. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, I get that. And we're going to touch into that too a little bit about the different dynamics of therapy. I think we've kind of made therapy in society a unilateral, you got to go to a professional situation. And for me, that's not what it is. Because number one, I can't afford every single time to go to a therapist. But number two, I just feel like there's other avenues that are therapeutic and doesn't have to be professional therapy. Go ahead, Tim. I see you're off mute.
Yeah, I was to piggyback on that first. Sometimes you can go to a therapist, they can set you back. So it's really a delicate balance. But as far as pressure, first off, welcome, Coach Cam. Welcome, Cousin Ro. Newcomers to the group. And as always, great to see you, Rico and Glenn. Welcome back, Bruce. I love your vibe. I love your vulnerability. You bring a great, great, great presence to the circle. But my stance, I really got an eye-opening on what pressure is probably like, I don't know, 6 months ago. And it came from just observing my wife. And my wife is claustrophobic. And we were somewhere, I want to say we were like in Reno or something, and an elevator came and there was a whole bunch of people on it. She's like, let's just get the next one. A whole bunch of people for her is like 4 people. So she was like, yeah, let's just get the next one. I'd rather go on a empty or a less people elevator. And the reason for it is she's extremely claustrophobic. That's like her biggest fear. So that helped me realize that's what pressure is. Pressure is an invisible claustrophobia. Where you're just claustrophobic and you can't see what it is that's actually surrounding you. And the pressure is the things that build up around you, which is pressures of work, pressures of leadership in your household, pressures of parenting, all those things kind of coming on you without the release, to kind of keep the analogy going with claustrophobia. Like if somebody has you over the blanket, if you could peek your head up and get a breath every once in a while, you're okay. If you don't get that breath over time, it's going to slowly kill you. So to me, that's when I think of pressure, I think of it as the intangible version of claustrophobia.
Yeah, no. Look, I've spent many nights as a kid hiding under my blankets from the boogeyman. So I know what it's like to try to breathe under that blanket. I can only imagine if you're claustrophobic. It's like, okay, I'm gonna just have to face this boogeyman because this air under this blanket is hot. Glenn or Rico, I think you're the last two that I got on this part.
Yeah, for me, kind of opposite of Cam, when he talked about, hey, this is kind of like a daily conversation I have in my household. I think that so initially the title made me think about like as a teenager, as a young man, as a kid, and in Philly, it was more of like, if the pressure was around you, you just compact it in, right? Like you didn't express it, you didn't share with anybody, you just had to put on that armor and just kind of toughen it out. And so unfortunately, I carried that same I guess kind of mentality throughout my young adult years and even into my late 30s. And it wasn't until more recently where it's like, that's not healthy, right? Like, so, thankfully I have a phenomenal circle of men around me and around my family where I feel that I can be vulnerable. I could be 100% open and honest with them and not feel judged, right? And so here I am now going into my early 40 years, and I'm just now being aware of that it's okay to do that, to be vulnerable with the people you call your best friends or your right or left hand men and women. And so this made me just kind of think about like, hey, you're in this moment in this season. And so while you may be getting attacked, mentally, you may be getting attacked with all the pressures of life. But the thing that's going to carry you through it is the support and the therapy. And like you mentioned, Ro, like therapy is not necessarily just paying someone to have you potentially go backwards just to go forward. And so for me, the last 2 months, I've been really leaning on my left and right side of my support system just to tell them, be honest, what's going on in my life, my day, and my mind. And that for me has been carrying me through some of those harder days You know, because again, going back to just being human, you have those days, but for the most part, I'm normally the person on the opposite end where people are leaning more on me. And so now I think for me, God is testing me to, if you say you have these close people, will you really allow them to, while they're reaching their hand, will you allow yourself to grab a hold of their hand and move forward? So that's kind of everything that kind of came to mind when I thought about these 3 words.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a really good point, G, is how the buildup of pressure, it takes place because it's almost like a survival instinct. Hey, I can't deal with this right now, or it's too much to deal with, so I'm not going to deal with it at all. And so you pack it down. You pack it down. You don't deal with it. You just pack it down and you keep going. And that survival instinct, the purpose of a survival instinct is to keep you alive. And it's funny because when we do that with pressure, eventually stress, turmoil, heartache, pain, and all those things that are buried with that pressure end up taking us out, whether we off ourselves, whether we have a heart attack, we have a stroke, whatever those things are, it comes because we've tried to implement a survival instinct or a survival strategy that truly isn't in alignment with true survival. It's in alignment with continuing, but it's not in alignment with continuing to thrive. So I think that's a great aspect that you bring into it. Rico, what you got?
Yeah, sure, I'm unmuted. You guys can hear me, right? Okay, cool. So not to, I don't want to beat a dead horse or come back around like G, but I basically grew up in the same type of situation. We didn't talk about any of this pressure. You just dealt with it. A man just deals with it. That's what I was told, right? You don't really talk about it. You don't cry. You don't therapy. I don't even know what that is. So, it's like, it's that whole premise of, machoism or whatever, right? Of dealing with that. And so growing up in that manner, pressure just began to build. And so you find other outlets for it. Thankfully, some of us found sports, which is the therapy part, right? You find sports, you find other outlets in order for you to try to release it. But as you get older and you don't have those things anymore, because we get old, right? The body gets decrepit, so you can't do all that stuff anymore, right? So then we try to lift weight. We try to do something else to try to fulfill that space. And what I've noticed is as the years have gone by, although it shifts from my external or the environmental aspect, no longer am I living around people, a whole bunch of drug dealers and prostitution and shooting and all. I'm not dealing with that anymore, right? But now it's a mental aspect of you versus you, because there's pressure and being in a position of leadership, people counting on you and making sure that those people are provided for, and these type of things that are occurring. And then at the end of the day, what's crazy is like, gee, I've always been the strong person. That's in my family. I've always provided for everybody. When they need money, they come to me. Is it right? So it's like, and so what I started to think when I read this was like, I really want to know, where do the strong people go? Because everyone's always able to come to you, but where do you go? Where is that support for you? Because it kind of feels kind of weak. You know how you're holding up everyone's back, and it's kind of like for a visual, there's a line of family or people that are all leaning backwards, right? And at the back of that very line is you, and you're holding up that person, but there's nobody on the behind you. So you're just trying to, get your legs and try to make sure you're strong. So when I saw that, I thought about that, and I'm like, man, I feel like that a lot of times. Like, man, it's nobody really there. I've been blessed enough to have some people come into my life. I was a G. I know Cam as well, Coach Cam. But you have good people that come in, but it's a process. That's what I'll say. It's a process to let them in. It's a process to be vulnerable, because we weren't taught that way. In our society, in our culture, it's the complete opposite. You're taught that, when you talk or you display feelings or speak about certain things like that, you become prey. So that's we're learning. And that's when I thought about that, I was like, man, all that came from those 3 words. I'm like, I'm my cousin over there. Like, I felt a little anxiety. I was like, ooh, I don't know if I really want
to talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know if I really want to make you kind of wiggle a little bit. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
It's crazy because you guys are touching. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna go real quick. It's crazy because the thing that you said, G, and the thing that you bounced off Rico is so wild, because it's like I have a brother that I've known since, I don't know, middle school. And I had to open up to him about something that it was killing me. And the longest time, I'm viewed as the strong one. Rico, you said, where do the strong people go? And I tell everyone who says it to me, do not call me strong. I'm not strong because, hey, look at me, I'm strong. Most of us are strong because we don't have a choice, right? Like the analogy about the people leaning on you, I don't got hella people leaning on me like that, but I definitely know the feeling of if I lean back right now, who's going to catch me, right? We mask the surviving with the strength, and it's all a facade when really what we need is support. Like it's the wrong S word. It's not strength, it's not survival that I need. What I need is support. But am I willing to let the people that I love for real, am I willing to be that? Because like my people who know me, right? But we all have parts of ourselves that only we know. That's just how that is, right? We don't and being able to be strong enough to be vulnerable, like, yo, I need help. We weren't raised like that. Everybody who's gotten up here and said it has said, I wasn't raised like that. That's not what I know. And that's crazy. Because what we're asking for is nothing abnormal. This is regular human shit. I mean, regular human stuff. I have emotions. I hurt. I need support. Just like you. That's not gender specific, right? Like that's wild. But men are expected to not have that space. That's crazy.
Yeah. Now I love the analogy that you gave, Rico, as far as you have everybody leaning back on you and you're pushing in to try to keep everybody up, and there's no fail safe. And the reality is here's the kryptonite to that is there's no fail safe because we refuse to be vulnerable to lean on somebody else. And as Bruce said, we mask that through by saying we're strong. I mean, yeah, I'm a pretty strong dude. Physically, mentally, I'm a pretty strong dude. However, I'm gonna need sometimes to be able to lean back and have somebody able to be able to hold me up for a bit and help stabilize me to get me to where I need to be. That's why I love Glenn and I have a weekly check-in. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's 10 minutes. Sometimes I think the quickest one was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds because we was both busy. But just having the ability to check in and tap in and have that level of support. And even if you're going through something or you're not, it's the practice of realizing that it's okay to have these moments where you take a breath and recenter and reground yourself. So I love that analogy. And here in the chat, Del Paso Jackson said, I used to ask myself that same question: where do I go to heal? And it's really about creating spaces to where you can go to heal. Cam, you said, look, if we're in too much conflict, you get moved to a different category for me. For me, if we're in too much conflict, you get moved out of the roster, period. I'm not moving you to a different category. I've ended friendships because they weren't working for either myself or for them. And I'm quick, hey, if I'm creating this pressure or conflict in your life, that's not healthy friendship. I need to excuse myself and I'm gone. And we don't ever have to talk again. I don't wish you bad. I wish you well, but we don't ever have to talk again. I will sever a relationship if I feel like it is creating the wrong pressure and it's not alleviating pressure in my life. With that, I do want to bring in the first question, because I think this is when I started thinking about this particular topic, I started thinking about what pressure looks like versus what pressure actually feels like. And anybody's welcome to jump in, but I want to be clear on how I'm asking this question. How does pressure look is how does it look externally? Because there's a face we put out. There's a reason why people think you're strong. Because when you're under pressure and you're in these pressure situations, however you execute to them signifies strength. But there's a feeling that we have on the inside when we are under pressure. And I believe that those feelings are not what are being displayed externally. I believe there's a different pressure that takes place or a different feeling that takes place internally. So anybody is welcome to jump in on that. Rico, did you come out to talk?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
The way it looks is romanticized stoicism, right? Like very stoic. This is a face or a facade that you build, and it's something that you deal with, right? And like you said, you probably always have the answers, right? You have to try to figure it out, or that's the look, right? The external look is you have the answers, you come up with the solutions, things get moved on. But in each one of those situations, how it feels is, you know, I don't know, what do they call them? You know, the Cadillac, the plates. It feels like, you know, you get 5 more of those plates through on your back. And so each of those situations, just more and more and more and more, right? But the way it looks on the external is that you're extremely, he's just stoic, man. He's calm, super calm. You get stuff executed, you get it done, and that's, you know, that's probably how it looks. That's what I'll say for a lot of us, because I think I heard a lot of different people on this panel, and they said, you know, they were the person that's the strong person. So I think that's how it looks to other people. Now inside, in your thought process, you're probably hulking out and raging and trying to figure out, right? And there's this whole thing going on, right? That maybe that's just me, but you know, you do know you have people counting on you. So I think the external never really matches the feeling of it. I'll say for me, I can't speak for other people. I don't know, for me, those two never link ever.
No, you and I are the same in that regard. What my face is showing you is definitely not what my brain is going through. Number one, I'm an overthinker, so all the thoughts that are going on in my mind, between slap you upside your head, run, go cry in a corner, like all the thoughts that are going in my mind compared to what I'm doing are definitely not in alignment. So I'm with that. Tim, what you got?
What it looks like. First off, if Del Paso Jax is who I think it is, he need to be on here soon. If you're listening, Del Paso Jax. But anyway, what it looks like, or what it feels like. Well, which one we want to go first? Looks like. What it looks like, I agree with Rico. It looks like manly, masculine, getting stuff done. What it actually feels like, though, it feels like Atlas holding the world on your shoulders. And my fellow military brethren here, I know Coach Cam, you said you're active still. Thank you for your service. Glenn, I know you had some in your background. I think, Rico, you did too. But we've all been there where we had that PT run in the morning, and we had a couple the night before, and you're struggling to get through that run. You got to lie to yourself, like, hey, just make it to this marker. I just gotta make it here. And then you get to that marker, and then you tell yourself another lie, just make it here. That's what happens with the weight of the world on your shoulder. I can hold on for just a little bit longer until this happens. And then that happens. Okay, well, what about until then? And then all of a sudden that load gets a little bit too heavy to bear. So to me, what it looks like you said, the glorification of the stoicism. What it feels like is Atlas. You got that whole world on your shoulders.
I like that. For me, the only thing that I could think that it looks like is, obviously this shit must look easy, because everybody in my life is like, wow, Bruce, you make it look so easy. And like, childhood terrible. Like, things were bad for a long time, and I'm finally getting my stuff together, right? But where is, I don't know. So I guess it looks easy because it has never been, but the feeling, it's sick, because the feeling is always exactly the same. It's dark ass clouds. It's fog. It's literally, I don't know where I'm going. You know what I mean? But outside, externally, I'm getting her done. But on the inside, I mean, it's crazy, because it's the same feeling every time. It's just dark clouds. You know what I mean?
Hey, I echo what everyone else just said. I mean, I can really relate to Rico, what he said. I tell my sisters all the time, it look easy. I make it look easy, but it's not. When my dad and my brother was alive, that pressure was kind of dispersed, right, amongst the men and the family, right? My dad passed away, so it felt a little heavier for me. And then my brother passed away, so it felt even more heavier for me, because I have 4 sisters. And so now everyone's looking at me, for if there is a funeral, let's go talk to Brian about how we're going to pay for this. If somebody's in need of something, if somebody needs a ride, it's Brian. Not and they seem to forget I have 5 folks, 6 folks in my own house that I'm taking care of, right? What it looks like, I tell you, for a lot of folks, it looks easy. And what it feels like, the weight of the world is on you 24/7. But you don't have the luxury well, I don't have the luxury. I'll say I won't speak for all men, but I don't have the luxury to decompress. I don't have the luxury um, to give the impression that it isn't what it looks like, right? I'm always on the go. I'm always making things happen, whether it's for me or for others. But they're not equally yoked. What it looks like and what it feels like are drastically different.
I agree. I think that what it looks like is camouflage to that individual. I mean, obviously, more specifically to men, to most men, it's camouflage to that individual. And as far as what it feels like, I think it feels like a pressure cooker. And depending on what your brand is, you will allow that pressure to either come out good or come out or come out bad. And so that's what pressure looks and feels like.
Yeah, really, really quick, Cam. I think, Brian, to your point, when you say make it look easy, and you have this weight of the world on your shoulders, there's never really an opportunity to take a break. I feel like somewhere along the road, we decided as men that we have to treat being under pressure like working out till failure. I'm going to push and push and push and push until I can't. And then I'm going to push some more until I can't. And then I'm going to push some more. I'm going to push until this bar crushes me. And when you look at it like that, that means the moments that we actually probably could find, not that we wouldn't have to look for them, but the moments that we could find to take a breath, take a break, take a breather, chill for a second, we don't take them because we are so conditioned that, yeah, I could take a breath here, but I need to keep pushing. I need to keep pushing. And all we're doing is, if you imagine you're pumping up a ball with a bike pump, you're pumping and you're pumping. All we're doing is adding more pressure to that ball, more pressure. And at some point, you're going to push and it's not going to go down. And if you force it to go down, you're going to blow that ball up. And that's what I feel like happens in these powder kegs of pressure. Go ahead, Cam. What you got?
So I remember when I saw the look of what it looks like when you're about to pop. About 3 years ago, I went on a vacation and I was like, this is the first time ever I'm not going to do anything. And I was doing a lot of stuff at that time. And so I took a picture on the beach, and after 6 months after that vacation, a lot of things happened. Me and my wife ended up filing for divorce, a lot of other things. Right. And so that picture popped up on my phone. I remember looking at it and I was like, I can't believe how distressed I look in this picture. Like, and it wasn't anything. It was just the eyes. Like, I could just see how distressed I was. And that lasted, like, that dark cloud. It's funny you said that, because I use that exact expression to describe that time of my life, almost about a year. Like, before, when I realized, like, I was doing too much. I didn't have the support I thought I needed. I had too much pressure, not only on myself, but externally. And I also, like, made a promise that I wasn't ever going to end up like that again. And so, but with that, that was a healing process. And that was also a process of finding the right people to place in my life that would allow me to grow out of that moment.
Yeah, picture will really tell on you. They'll be like, dang, I got bags under my eyes. Like, I look like Frankenstein. Pictures do not lie. And you could say it was the lighting. You could put a filter on it. But eventually, when you move and that filter shake off real quick, it's going to be like, dang, I was really going through it. I actually remember the not the most pressure I've ever been under. It was probably the most pressure at that time in my life because I was so young. But when I went through my first divorce, and I remember seeing pictures from that time. And I mean, I was as skinny as a crackhead, like, no joke, skinny as a crackhead. And it was like, I wasn't eating, I wasn't taking care of myself. And it was like, all I could do was stay on autopilot. Like, I got to go to work. Because even in that state of depression and not being able to function fully as an adult, I still felt like people were counting on me. People are relying on me. And I have to hold a bare minimum line of financial support. And so, but when I look at those pictures and when I see that picture every once in a while, I'm like, dang, like you weren't even taking care of you and you were worried about other people. And as admirable as that may seem to be, the reality that I've learned since then is that if I'm not taking care of me, I won't be here to take care of anyone, period. Won't be here to take care of anyone. And that's not the space that I want to end up in. What you got, Tim?
I was gonna say, there's a reason why when you're on the plane they tell you put your mask on first, right?
You absolutely, absolutely. I do want to move on to this question here because this kind of came up as you were talking, Coach Cam. In regards to support, or in regards to pressure, I'm sorry, we're still on pressure. In regards to pressure, one of the things that I've noticed from a lot of men, and that I'm hearing from you guys in tonight's conversation, is really it's almost not knowing how to just say, I need to take a break from taking on pressure. And so I really love for somebody to kind of chime in on how you set like healthy boundaries to keep from taking on unnecessary pressure. Granted, the mortgage is going to be a bill that's going to come in. It don't care what your day is like. The mortgage is the mortgage, rent is rent, gas is gas. Like those things are standard pressures that that are kind of outside of our control, so to speak. But how do you set those boundaries to keep from taking on unnecessary pressure, or in the sense of maybe saying those unnecessary dramas?
I'll go first because this is kind of fresh on my mind. I've gotten better at really prioritizing. One of the big myths, and we'll talk about this probably more in the therapy portion, but I'm a firm believer. I got three parents in my life. I got my mom, I got my dad, and I got the streets. Unfortunately, they all teach the same things, and my mom and dad were great, but they taught some things like, don't let them see you sweat, don't let them see you cry, tough it out. The same things that you were talking about. Um, but one of the things I've been doing better at is combating the myths of compartmentalization, because that is actually a really good thing if you use it right. So I've gotten better at refusing to mortgage my future to not have to deal with crap in my present. So what I'll do is, if it's something that can wait, it'll wait. If it's something that I can get done, that can deal with it now, I'll just bite my tongue and deal with it now, grit and teeth and bear it, because I refuse to mortgage future Tim's, stress levels to alleviate current Tim's stress levels. So a lot of that is just prioritization. What can wait? What can't wait? But that's how I see it. But we'll talk more about the parent thing, I'm sure, in the therapy piece.
Mhm.
But compartmentalization is good. If you use it right. It helps you in the moment, but it damages you in the long run if you never deal with it. So if you never deal with it, it will deal with you, and you might not like how it does it. To my fellow military people, I know we got that drilled into us. Compartmentalized mission, accomplish the mission, and you get that programmed into you, and you start taking that into your real world life. Next thing you know, you're handling your grief like that. You're handling your divorces like that. And you get taught from the street not to trust anybody. Everybody got an angle. So when someone offers help, you look at it like, what is this person's real angle on me? I don't want them to have any leverage on me in the future. And you get, what is the word I'm looking for? You just get, you lose trust in the world. Not saying that you have to have trust in everybody, but you don't know how to turn it off. You start turning hands away from people you could trust, like people that would be welcomed in the men's circle. So that's my thoughts on that.
I just sent this to my wife and my children's group chat this morning, actually. I said, and I heard it from somebody. I don't know where I heard it. I was reading something, but as soon as so anyway, it says, in school, you get taught the lesson and then you take the test. But in life, you take the test and then get taught the lesson. And man, I sent it to my children and my wife because that's kind of how I'm trying to approach things. And so the question is, how do you set boundaries from, you know, taking on unnecessary pressure? And then you added in the other caveat, drama. I asked myself, what is going to be the lesson from this test right here, right now? And it helps me in my career because I manage people now, and it's all about getting the job done, getting the mission accomplished, right? I don't care about nothing else you got going on. We just need you to do the job. Well, I'm taking that with me out in the world. What am I going to get from this interaction? Is it going to be more pressure? Is it going to be a headache? Is this just going to be drama? Do I need to react this way? And what I'm learning is, really, I don't know why it's taken me so long, 40 years, and I'm just now learning that I can't control shit but me. I can only control Bruce, right? No matter how good my intentions are, no matter how I articulate what I need done, I can only control me. So now the test every day is, do you really want to be the person you're saying you want to be? So is this unnecessary pressure? Am I putting this pressure on myself? Am I bringing this headache onto myself? Am I bringing this drama onto myself? Setting the boundaries for me is just saying, no, this does not align with how I want my day to go. Like, wake up in the morning, children didn't do X. Do I rage dad? Do I scream? Do I cuss? Do I yell? Do I just ask them politely to do what I need done? Because they're going to do it either way, right? They're going to do it. But do I have control over myself in whatever the situation is? Because some of the pressures, honestly, I bring on to myself. And I know that. And as I'm going on, as I'm growing through this journey, I'm recognizing those moments. Hey, you're about to bring unnecessary bullshit your way. Keep it moving.
Yeah, it's funny for me. My younger kids, even my wife, tell me, you know what, you're not as hard as on the younger ones as you were on the older ones. And that's part of that. That's part of that alleviating the pressure, that process, alleviating the drama. Like Bruce said, a lot of the pressure I do bring on myself. I mean, I had a father who worked for the Department of Correction, was in the military. Have a son who's in law enforcement. That's the household we grew up in, right? And those are all those experiences that I brought into my marriage. And then you start having these kids, and it's like, you know, and then I was tougher on the older ones, and the ones that are in the middle kind of remember both phases, right? But for me, I have a low tolerance for drama. And it's like, if you're not compatible with where I am, where my family is, if my kids are uncomfortable, you know, I'll cut you off in a heartbeat. In terms of the pressure, I'm still learning how to deal with that, right? Because I equate pressure or not providing as failure. In that, I create a lot of pressure for myself. But like Bruce now, if I walk out of here and the girls got the loft completely dirty, it's just dirty. It's dirty till somebody clean it up. I'm not gonna scream. I'm not gonna yell. I'm not gonna, create additional pressure on myself to make sure the loft is clean. 5 years ago, we would have probably been fighting about this dirty loft, right? But I mean, I've had to learn how to triage things in my life, prioritize, triage, however you want to put it. And those things that are, life, limb, or sight. Life, anything in these walls right here. Anything else is outside of this house, and I can triage that appropriately and deal with that or not. But the life piece is in these four walls, and that's what's a priority for me.
Yeah, that triage aspect is super important, because going back to what Tim said, you're mortgaging your future for your present peace. And the funny thing about the future, I guess the best way I could describe this is in California. In California, at one point, we decided, and by we, I mean politically, it was decided that we were going to borrow from future gas tax revenue, with the assumption that gas prices were always going to be at $4 or above a gallon. And then the economy, the bubble burst on the Great Recession, and gas prices went under $3 a gallon. And so all this anticipated future revenue that we were going to be able to make up on the back end, we weren't able to make it up. And so I remember when I moved from California, at one point, I think it was like the second year I was away from California. All of a sudden they were like, hey, we're going to increase the gas tax in California. And it was like 10 cents for diesel and 15 cents or 20 cents for, I can't remember the numbers, but it was like an increase in taxes. And that was because they thought they were going to get this revenue when they borrowed it against the future. They didn't get it. And now they have to figure out a way to make it up. And I shared that not for some political, I'm not running for anything in California, FYI. But I shared that because that's what happens when we begin to say, I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. It's no different than when I tell my son, it's like, yeah, you not doing that one assignment on day one, it didn't matter because you could have made it up on day two. But typically you don't do it on day two, day three, day four, day five. And now you're here at the end of the quarter and you are trying to make up all these assignments that you have a backlog on, unfortunately. And you don't know that, hey, today the internet's going to be out and you're not going to be able to do any assignment. Like, that's when it bites you. It didn't bite you on day one. It wasn't an issue. It wasn't an issue on day 5, day 10. And honestly, in the big picture of life, it won't be an issue when you're 42 years old that you didn't complete that assignment. But the day that it did bite you in your immediate future is that day when it's almost like, cousin, you manage people as well. So that person who's always late, and you give them a verbal, and you give them a written, and you give them a final warning on attendance, and then they finally have their car actually breaks down, or they get in a car accident, or there's a major car accident on the freeway, and they can't get to work on time, and they get let go not because of the car accident. They'll say, "Oh, there was traffic, and they let me go because I was late. Everybody was late that day." But what they won't talk about is all the times they mortgaged their future and got themselves to that place to where, oh man, they let me go today because of attendance, but I put myself in this situation. And this is something that I struggle with when it comes to the pressure aspect, because my wife will tell you, we have had in the past couple of months, we've had some heated arguments, and it has been in those arguments where it's like, okay, I'm trying to keep the peace. And maybe I put some things to the side and trying to keep the peace that I shouldn't have put to the side, that I should have addressed. And so now here we are in this conversation that's getting heated and getting intense, and I can feel the pressure boiling in me. And then finally it gets to, well, what the fuck do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me to do? Like, then you get to that point, and it's like, going back to what you said, Bruce, that's not who I want to be. And so I'm just now getting to this space where I'm learning to apologize faster when, hey, that was this part, though it could have been created by this part over here, this part is my part to own. And so I got to apologize for the part that I own, so that I can now take the lesson, now that I done failed the damn test, take the lesson and try to do better the next time. And know that when the next test comes up, I'm probably still going to get a couple things wrong. I'm not planning to ace any tests here. That's not going to happen in my lifetime. But knowing that I'm going to get a couple things wrong and being able to move forward, that's where, for me, how I'm learning how to keep those healthy boundaries for myself and not pushing things off, because when you push them off, the most inopportune time is when you're going to have to deal with it. And it's not going to be just it's going to be everything that was behind it and the new thing that sparked the revolution that lit the fuse. Anybody else got anything on this one before we move on?
So I think one of the things that I do to set boundaries for necessary pressure as well is evaluating when I'm putting pressure on myself for a standard I thought somebody wanted, and then they obviously don't want it. So I'm real big on, and as managers, I'm sure you guys understand, is like, I'm real big on, like, I want everyone to be great. I see what is inside of you. I see what could be, and I want to help push you and help you and support you to get to that point. And unfortunately, though, sometimes people don't want to be great, or sometimes people don't want that support. Even just recently, a friend of mine, we do some business stuff together, and I was trying to support. And eventually they said, hey, I didn't ask for this and this, that, and the third. And I said, well, actually you did. However, don't worry about it anymore, because I will not put undue stress on myself if it's not even helping you the way that you said you wanted it to help you. So don't worry about it no more. And that's something that I've kind of learned as I've gotten older is, imparting my standards on other people, but also when someone gives you that that like piece back of actually I didn't want this from you than just to take the hint and then just back off.
Coach Cam, that is so big. I'm trying not to curse, Billy. I apologize. I have a brother of mine, and he went through a situation that he brought me into, and the situation was heavy, and I was already going through stuff. And I remember us having a conversation one morning. I'm at work. I leave my desk. We're having a conversation, and I'm giving him my opinion and how I feel about the situation. And he says, well, you know what, honestly, Bruce, I don't give a F when nobody says woo, woo, woo. I was like, oh, noted. We have not had that conversation ever again, nor will we. Because for me, it was already heavy. Like, we're talking heavy stuff. I'm already going through some stuff. And if you don't want me to hold your bag, I promise you I'll put your bag down. Tell me when. I'll hold you up for as long as I can. But as soon as you let me know that my efforts are being, well, tell me when. I'll drop the bag. Don't play with me. Great point, Coach Cam. Great point.
Absolutely. Hey, I'll drop the bag if I have to. I get it. Go ahead, Glenn. I see you.
Now, Ro, I know we're about to transition to the next one. So the one thing that I'll say, or the two things I'll say with this is, someone mentioned the word mask earlier. And I think that to this question, as men, if you are a man walking around with the mask on your face, it will be extremely hard for you to set any boundaries because you're walking around pretending to be someone that you're not, or you're not dealing with the root cause of said issues, et cetera, right? And so that ties into the other piece of it. In order to set those boundaries, I think one of the things you need to do is carve out time for yourself. And then even within that time, reflect on why you even need to set those boundaries, right? Because I think as men in our society, something that we don't do enough is set boundaries, right? Regardless of whatever background you're from, regardless of the environment you grew up in, something that's not taught enough or spoken on enough is the value of setting boundaries and what that means and what it looks like. And so I think that in order for people to, you talk about the pressures, in order to set those boundaries, you need to do the reflection on what boundaries need to be set in the first place.
Yeah, that intentional time, man, is critical. Like, I think, Bruce, you say this often, as far as like we get to what we want to get to and we make excuses why we don't get to everything else. Like, and it goes back to, if you're not here, if you take yourself out, if you're allowing yourself to be taken out medically or even mentally, because you're just staying under pressure 24/7, at some point you've decided that you don't want to get to you, and that somehow everybody else became a higher priority than yourself and your well-being. I'm with that, but I do want to transition to this next segment, which is the support section.
But what you just said, we've been conditioned to think that we are selfish when we want to put ourselves first. When you start, that's a thing. Well, go ahead.
No, man. I don't even know why you said that. You about to re-spark the pressure conversation. But we have been conditioned to think that we're selfish in that regard. Like, I've seen on social media videos, well, why does the man get the big piece of chicken and then the kids get the little pieces of chicken or whatever it may be, right? And going back to what you said, Brian, feeling like when you were in a single income situation and you were the sole provider, you're like, I got to keep this thing spinning. I got to keep this thing going, because if I fail, it fails. Like, if I don't bring in the money, we all won't eat. And so being in that role, when we think about, oh, the big chicken, little chicken, that's my favorite conversation, the big chicken, little chicken. It's not so much about, am I getting the big piece of chicken or am I getting the small piece of chicken? Because honestly, at the end of the day, I don't care as long as I get something to eat. But knowing that we have been conditioned to say that if there is only one piece of chicken, everybody else eats and I go without.
And
because I'm the man.
And then after they eat the chicken, they're going to go to sleep. But when something go bump in the night, you got to get up and go see what it is on an empty stomach. Everybody in the house knows how to use the firearm and knows what it is, but you got to go and take the bullet on an empty stomach.
Yeah, it's easier that way. So I will move on to the next part of this conversation, being the support aspect. So it's clear that all of us know what it is to be under pressure. All of us have different experiences with pressure. But when I start thinking about support, and Cam, this really, when you said this at the beginning, that's why I was like, man, that's got to be something we come back to for support, about setting ourselves up with the right support. Because there's going to be things when we're under pressure when we just can't do it by ourselves. It doesn't matter. Like, the world will put you, or life will put you in situations that, I don't care how strong you are, how financially savvy you are, how much you planned for it or didn't plan for it, you're going to need some help. I remember when we bought our first house in California. Here I am, I'm grinding. I'm working 3 jobs. I have money saved. I'm over here. Do I need to pay off this debt? Do I need to move this money for down payments? Okay, we're doing FHA, 3% down. Like, I'm moving numbers and like crazy. And then we get to the finish line at escrow. And they're like, okay, escrow is scheduled for tomorrow. You'll need to bring $2,000 to close escrow. What? Like, what are you talking about here? $2,000. I just gave you 8. I don't have no more money. Like, you thought I had 10? I don't have 10. I had 8. I gave you what I had. And I remember being in this place where it's like, not only if I don't lean on help and the support that I need in that situation, do I lose the house and lose the money that I've put into this transaction, but there's just so much more fallout. It's like, you lose the house, you have this new embarrassment. Now you don't want to go to a house, your house shot, and all these different things. But I remember having, in the middle of the night, to write an email to a very close family friend of mine and say, hey, look, this is the situation that I'm in. I need to go to escrow to get this done. I don't have anywhere else I can get this money from. I need your help. And they actually helped me to get my first house. And it was like, man, what would have happened if I just allowed my pride to be like, nah, I ain't asking for no help because, I got it. And then if I fail, it's on me. No, it's, if you fail, it is on you because you didn't ask for any help. So from this support aspect, the very first question I want to ask you guys when it comes to support is, for you guys, what do you do when the standard support system doesn't work? I mean, whatever your go-tos are, like I think we all have our key go-tos that are like maybe 1, 2, 3 levels deep. But then after that, if that doesn't work, it's like, where do we go to get that support if our traditional circles are not working for us?
I think I'm trying to find the I'm trying to find the 1, 2, 3. Those 3 levels. You said 3 levels. I was like, and when you were selling the story, I was like, I can't write nobody. Like, I don't know. I'm like, because they writing me. I don't know. And maybe like you, I don't know. Maybe it's good. Maybe I put myself in this situation, isolated, or I didn't, interact or co-mingle with people that could have helped, or however, whatever. I don't know. I wanted to raise my hand and be like, I honestly don't know, because so from a certain aspect, there's people you can call for mental support, right? So there's people that you can call that they'll pray for you, they'll speak a word to you, they'll motivate you, they'll probably inspire you, they probably have something good that you can read. Phenomenal, right? Now, if we're talking just cold hard, man, look, rent is due, mortgage due, I need it's now that one I'm a little lost on. And I I think I feel what Bruce is saying, because he's looking at me like, because he knows like what happens, or what is the answer to that. I think I'm looking for the answer for that, and I'm still looking for that, because I've never found that. I've never had a person that I could count on in that aspect, right? People have, like, I tell people, like, if you have parents that are great parents, man, adore your parents, love on them, give them, like, praise them, be thankful to them, because I didn't have that. If you have somebody that's around, maybe, all of us had like grandparents or something like that. My grandparents passed. Whatever it is, whatever you have, be super thankful of that and be grateful of the people that you do have, the support. And if you don't have it, try to find it and cultivate it, because I'm trying to cultivate it. So I like this group because maybe if I hear some suggestions from other people, I can jot that down and try to build onto mine. That's so I'm all ears.
Rico, you're on to a point, and right when I jumped on the boat with you, I'm doing this thing with myself where I really ask myself the truth. So, like, I'm right on the boat with you. For real, I have people that I can call and talk to, and but I don't think and then so I catch myself. I don't know if I would be vulnerable, if I'd be willing to be vulnerable enough to call the people that I would never call you, Billy, and be like, bro, my rent's due. Can I get $500? Is that to say you wouldn't help me? No, that's not to say that. I think for me, the problem is when my standard support system doesn't work, and if it's a financial situation, if it's over $200, I'm not calling nobody. I'm gonna get it. You know what I mean? And I think that has been a hindrance to something that was said earlier about allowing the people that love you to support you, right? Maybe that's something that I got to tap into in my own, personal psyche or whatever. Maybe I do have people, Rico, maybe you do have people, maybe I'll speak for me. I don't know if I'd be willing to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, bro, let me borrow $1,000. Because I don't know anybody that would let me borrow $200, like straight up. I'm gonna go recycle is what I'm gonna go to. I'm gonna figure it out.
Get these California redemption values up out of this thing. No, I'm with that. I think though what happens is when you end up in a space like for you, Rico, and you, Bruce, that you're in where you're like, I can't think of anyone, and you stay in that space so long that you just stop looking for people. And I think part of the reason we stop looking is because we perceive it as integrity. I don't want to befriend someone because I want to need them financially in the future and they got it like that. And that's the conversation I had to have with myself in sending this message, is because I knew that I've known the person that I reached out to. This is the parent of one of my closest friends. I've known this person since the middle of junior high school. I'm reaching out to this person, and it's like, I don't want them to think that I've just been hanging around waiting for the moment that I could ask for a handout. And I think that pride, I have a list that I'm going to share later, but I think that pride begins to play a factor in that, because our pride says, well, they were my friend and they've been my friend, and we somehow equate that to because I haven't asked them for anything, and I see all the other people who do ask them for their help and do ask them for their money. But when I was drafting that email, I was like, not only am I drafting this email from the perspective of I need help, but I also drafted that position from a position of, and here's my solution to get this money back to you. I can get it back to you in 3 weeks, or I can get it back to you in 4 weeks. 4 weeks is more comfortable for me, but if you need it back in 3 weeks, I can have it back in 3 weeks. You just let me know. Being able to have that type of conversation with someone, even if they can't help you, if they say, hey, we don't have it, what you learn in that conversation is they don't have it. Some people will internalize it. Oh, well, they have it, but they don't want to give it to me. But if I tell you I don't have it, I'm either going to tell you I don't have it or I'm unwilling to give it. But it'll always be the truth. Either I don't have it, would love to help you, I can't help you, or hey, I'm not willing to give that because that's beyond my threshold. I tell people all the time, like, look, you're gonna need the Lord to tell me I got to give you some money if I got to give you money, and He's gonna have to say, hey, Billy, go ahead and give them this. And every single time, I promise you, I give whatever it is that I got to give. I give. I don't have no problem with that. But when it comes to somebody just reaching out to me, and Bruce, there's been times where it's like, hey, I'm going to share something about you, Bruce, that a lot of people probably don't even know. Back when I was doing interstations on First Row, they changed the logic, and I wasn't able to do interstations anymore because I didn't have a platform like this to host guests on. And when I wanted to get First Row up and running, Bruce was giving me money every month. And I remember, Bruce, we were having this conversation, and you were like, my wife is like, yo, why the hell are you giving this dude money? Like, why are you giving this dude money? What's going on? And the reality was, Bruce was like, Billy has poured so much information into me and all the content that he's created. This is like the least that I can do is to pour back into him and help him thrive and move his platform along. And then there came a time where Bruce was in need. And Bruce didn't call me and say, hey, Ro, I need some help, I'm struggling, or anything like that. It was just like, hey, I'm going to try to get this up and running. I'll get this money together when I get this money together. And I was like, don't worry about it. I've already taken and care of it. You're caught up. Don't even worry about it. So being that person who would typically not ask for help, because Bruce and I believe Bruce and I are the same in that regard. Not typically the people who are going to be like, hey, I need help. Not typically the person who's going to raise their hand and say, ooh, I have a question. Being that we're not those people, to be able to see that in each other. Hey, Ro needs help, and he's trying to get something of substance off the ground. To see that in Bruce and say, hey, Bruce needs help, and to be able to offer that to get him to where he needed to be in that state. And to be like, yo, and this ain't alone. In both cases, he was like, this ain't I'm loaning you money to get your business up. This is I'm giving you money to get your business up. And I was like, hey, this is me giving you some money to get yourself where you need to be. And I remember you told me your wife at the time was like shocked, because when you don't know somebody, right? His wife doesn't know me. We didn't have a relationship. We just spoke for the first time, I think, this past weekend. But she didn't know me to know the level of integrity and character that I have, that I'm also the exact same type of person her husband is, in the aspect of giving and in other aspects that we found out this weekend. But in the aspect of giving, I'm the same heart. And so I think that's where, when it comes to like feeling like we can't ask for help and support, I think that's where it comes from, is that we look at it from a perspective of, I don't want to be that person who always has their hand out. I don't want to be the person every time your phone rings, you're like, what is Billy asking for now? What does he need now? How much money he need now? What kind of grocery bill they got now? What rent, how much short you rent on rent now? I don't want to be that person. But when you know you're not that person, this comes to knowing thyself. When you know you're not that person, all of a sudden you can make those phone calls and reach out to people and ask for that help. And hey, you might find, Rico, hey, I got 3 people in there that are willing to help me if they have the means, but they just don't have the means right now. And being able to know that, hey, I might come to you again in the future, but if you don't have it, it's not a problem. I'll rest on that point right there. What you got, Tim?
I was going to say, it's funny because I think I only got 2. I got my wife and I got you. I think that's the only 2 people I got. But I think what happens is, and this is by and large, not everybody conforms this, but most people, the majority of people, their pride gauge is broken. I think back to Ving Rhames in Pulp Fiction when he's like, nah, don't listen to that, man. That's just pride fucking with you. And I think about that because I think everybody's pride gauge is broken. So they either have too much pride and won't ask for anything, or they have no pride and they ask for everything. And everything is a panicked emergency. And then how does that response, like if you can't help them, what's the responses you usually get when you can't help somebody or you're not comfortable helping them? Oh, so you're going to turn me away? Now all of a sudden you're the one that did that to them. When it's like, nah, I didn't do that to you. I just can't help. There's a difference. So I think when I think about the standard, what I do when that standard doesn't work, because I'll be real transparent, my gauge is really broke. I think that thing was turned in 25 years ago. My pride is too strong, where I won't ask for anything, just because I tie that into my independence and, like you said, my integrity. to the point to where there was early, like 6 months ago, you had a conversation roll with my wife to get me to fly out to Utah because y'all felt I needed the decompression because I was underneath a lot of stress and pressure that y'all have observed. And you took it upon yourself to say, nah, you coming out here for a weekend and we're going to have a good time and help you get back on a regular, get your equilibrium back up to speed. So I'm not only a member, I'm also a client, you know what I mean, of the Broken Gauge Club. But I think that's by and large what this is, man, is we either have too much or we have zero. Very few people have it calibrated just right where they can compose an email like you did with the plan of how they're going to do it. Most people, can you help me or nah? And then when you're like, nah, then they're like, well, then you're out of my life. Like you did something to them. Or if they say, can you help me or not, and you help them, now all of a sudden they see you as a revenue stream. I got this, and this, and I could probably get him for 200. You know what I mean? And it turns into that. So I think how you deal with it, how I deal with it, is I turn to a great philosopher, Sean Carter. You might know him as Jay-Z. Whenever there's a drought, get your umbrella out because that's when I brainstorm. I start brainstorming, thinking of things, solutions, alternative solutions that I could do. And sometimes that might not be the quick fix that I want, but I got to put in extra work and take extra time and deal with inconvenience for a little bit longer until I could solve it on my own. Unfortunately, that's kind of the turn of events that is. But I'll turn it over to somebody else.
No, I think you're where a lot of us are. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, Tim hit the nail on the head. I mean, I don't even know what standard support looks like, right? You said like Rico said, you said 3 levels. I said, whoa. I'm like, that level is like a half level for me. And part of it is me, right? Because I'm just wired that way. I understand that I'm wired that way. Is that I try to put myself in a position to where I don't have to step out and ask for support, specifically financially. One of the things I have done though is when my wife and I got together. We had some young kids. We had to decide, okay, I'm going to work. You're going to work. It wasn't really a decision. I was going to work, but she would have been working for daycare, right? So she was a stay-at-home mom for 14 years. And so when she started working again, we had to have that conversation. It's like, babe, I need some help. So we had a conversation about what she can do to contribute. And she was like, and she was extremely real with me. She said, honey, all the things that you do, I did before I met you. She said, we got together. You just took all this up. You just took the responsibility yourself to do all this, right? And so we had a conversation and we kind of worked some things out to where it took a lot of pressure off of me, which I can appreciate with her because it was a different element of our relationship, of our marriage that we hadn't really talked about, right? Until recently. But in terms of standard support, there's pockets of people I can count on. And it's not that I can't count on those folks. Is that there's something within me, whether it's pride, whatever the case may be, is, I want to do it myself. I want to solution it myself. And like Tim said, if you figure a football field, you can run from one end to the other end in a straight line in 10 seconds. But for me, sometimes when I solution these things myself, I may run sideline to sideline, and it may take me an hour to get to the other end, but I'll get there. So a lot of it is on me. I recognize that. A lot of it is the fact that I don't want to be disappointed. I just don't want to deal with that disappointment. So I try to figure it out internally. I try to put myself in the position where I don't have to step outside of my box to take care of some of those important things.
I don't want to look at you and think to myself, damn, because I would have helped you, right? And that as shallow as it sounds, but it's just a human. I don't want to be disappointed. That's a fantastic point. That's just.
Yeah. Hey, that right there, that's a takeaway. Is we get to this space where we're so concerned with being let down. And my wife has brought this to my attention, and she's gonna be like, see, when you talk to them on the men's circle, you always say I'm right, but when you talk to me, that's her voice too. That's her Bert and I always give her the Bert and Ernie voice. Ernie. But that's one of the things when we first like really started building our relationship. She was like, babe, you don't have to do it all on your own. And coming from a space and coming from other relationships where I did have to do it all on my own because nobody else was going to do it. Like I remember there would be times I'd come home, I worked an 8-hour day, I've gone to school for another 6 hours, I'm on my way home, and it's like, okay, I'm 14 hours into this day. I get home, hey, can you go back out and get some milk from the grocery store? What the hell are we talking about milk for? Like, what do you mean? Can I go and get some milk? You've had 14 hours to get milk. Why am I going to get milk? So I've been in those relationships where I've had to do things on my own, and I never felt like it wasn't on me. And so now being in this relationship where I have a true partner who's like, hey, I'll carry some of that. And it's even when I'm asking her to do things like there was I forget, there was like an appointment that I needed. And I was like, babe, can you set up this appointment for me? And even in that, I remember feeling like after the fact, guilty, like, Ro, you could have set that appointment up yourself. You could have done that yourself. But it's that practice for when there is something big. Hey, babe, we're short on our budget, $700. Can you help me find 350 on your end? I'll find 350 on my end. Like it's practice for that, but it's you struck a nerve on me. I don't want to be disappointed, and the only person that I know, and I think we're all in this boat. Only person I know who ain't gonna let me down is me. That's the only person I know. And so everybody is like, yep. But that is conditioning. No different than being in the military. They condition you to follow orders, not question orders, follow orders. And so when you're in this space where you're conditioned to follow orders, or you're in this space where you're conditioning yourself that the only person I can rely on is me, guess what? Every opportunity that you have to rely on somebody else, you don't take. Every opportunity that you have to try to look for somebody to help you, you don't take, because you don't want that disappointment. Because ain't nothing worse than somebody saying, hey, I need to borrow $1,000. And the person says, yeah, I got you. Don't worry. When do you need it? I need it by Friday. And Friday comes and goes and they don't even call you. And they ain't picking up their phone when you call. Or you let somebody borrow $1,000 and now it's time to pay back. And you call and they ain't picking up their phone. Like either way, I don't want to be disappointed. And so, man, you struck a nerve. That almost hit me in the back of the ear.
Man, it's even worse. It's even worse. Well, I'll just speak for me. I think we're about to get into therapy, but it's even worse when it's a family member. Like for me, this all kind of started with parents, right? Which they're your parents and they're supposed to like do certain things, right? You ask them or you expect certain things, and then they say, well, I'm not going to do that. You kind of just got to figure that out, And so from that point, for me, it told me as a little kid, like I was a little type, right? But in my brain, I figured out like these are the people that made me. And if they really kind of don't, if they ain't gonna be there, ain't nobody really in it. So I gotta kind of, I gotta try to figure this thing out. And you gotta make sure you got it on your own because they made you and they not there. So what does all the rest of these people owe you? And I think that's kind of what it, what it came from. It's kind of it's a little crazy. And on that same note, full circle, the parents come back and need you, and maturity says, yeah, you'll help them when right. It's a whole cycle there, man. It's crazy.
Well, no, Rico, you're touching on something crazy because that is why it's cousin Brian, right? That was why your disappointment resonated so deep with me. And I have to explain to my wife the reason why I take shit so personal is because my parents set me up for that. They failed me early. So all I've known is failure. All I've known is disappointment when I need from others. That's all I've known. And trying to, that sets up the reason why I don't want to be vulnerable when I need to borrow $2,000, or while when my life is crashing down, I'm not calling you crying because I don't want to be let down. I don't want to feel you not care. I'd rather just imagine you don't care, but once I feel that you don't care, it crushes me, right? Like, who wants that? Nobody. And that's a deep-seated programming from my parents not giving a shit. But I will say this, my daughters don't feel that way, because that was one of those things that I took and I made sure I don't want my kids to feel like that, because walking this earth as a 40-year-old man, not knowing anything about the people who brought me here, not ever feeling loved by the people who brought me here, is probably the reason why I spend so much time giving out so much love, because it's what I wanted. It's what I want today still, right?
Cam, I'd be interested in asking you a question, because I remember listening to one of your L3 perspectives, and you're talking about coming from a single mother household, and your father not being there. And I don't know the background of why he wasn't there. I don't know if he chose not to be there, if he passed away. I don't know any of that. But from that perspective of disappointment, I'm not even going to use the word disappointment, feeling like life isn't fair, right? Like, that's not fair. Everybody else has their dad at their house and I don't. You speak very eloquently about my mother allowing me to feel emotions and feel these ways about life, whatever I was going through. But my question to you would be, when it comes to like that standard support, Enrico, that first level is probably parental support. We anticipate it to be that. It ain't always that, but we anticipate it to be that. How do you navigate like not how did you and how do you navigate not really having that relationship in place, or that paternal relationship in place with your father, in regards to now that's not even, I'm assuming that's not a person you would reach out to for support if he's still living?
So from as soon as I could understand, my mother made it very clear that she gave my father a choice. So she said, my father's Muslim. He's from Kuwait originally, and so part of their religion is like, if you don't have children out of wedlock. That's not okay. I mean, granted, most religions think that, but in retro, and so my mom was like, yo, you have a choice here. You either be a father or you don't ever come back. But I'm not going to do the halfway thing with you. Like, my son is either going to have a dad or he's not going to have a dad. I'm not going to do this like, oh, maybe your dad's going to visit you on Christmas. Maybe your dad's going to send you a birthday card. And so he took that choice, and she made it apparent very early on not to be angry with him and not to be upset at him. And so as I grew up, my mom was very intentional with, I think, the male role models that she also had me around, as I grew up. So, I had a grandfather, my mom, boyfriends that she had been with for an extended amount of time who were really great people and things like that. And so, but I actually did reach out to him when I had my first daughter. I reached out to him when I was about to have her, and it was very much, I let him know, like, hey, you got a granddaughter, like, because I knew who he was, and so, it was very much, hey, ask whatever questions you want, but his exact words were, ask whatever questions you want, but let's not turn this into a dialogue. We've lived, 2 decades apart by now. You're your own man. I'm over here. But I'll answer any questions you have. But after this, like, we don't need to talk anymore. And so my mom has always been my first level of support. She's always been my biggest fan. She's always had my back, even when I may have not been the best son in the whole world. And so I, once again, have always been very fortunate to have that. Not to mention, growing up, I saw a lot of fathers, realistically, who were lacking. So I was like, oh, like, everybody feels bad, like, oh, oh, my Cam. And I'm like, no offense, like, your father's not even really that great. Like, but my mom's dope as hell. So, like, I got one parent that's as dope as more dope than both your parents. So like, who's really lacking, bro? And so that's one thing I tell people all the time, I am very fortunate on how I grew up, especially with a single mother as an only child. To this day, my mom still waits. She asks me all the time. She's like, "Are you sure you're not broken? It's okay. Like, if you feel some type of way towards me, the way you grew up," just because I also moved around a lot. I went to 13 different schools growing up. I lived in 10 different cities. And so people here didn't have a father, moved around all the time, lived in all these cities, barely graduated high school. And they just like, it's funny, society turns me into a charity case. And I'm just like, bro, I had one of the best childhoods I can think of. And everything, every experience I had, I was fortunate enough to take the positive out of it and become the man that I am today. So that's why I kind of didn't really speak, because, I know a lot of men, like Rico said, like all of you guys have said, like, don't have even just that like first level of support. And I was always very fortunate to have that first level. Second level, that's when it gets a little shaky. That's when it's like, all right. But that was also kind of, in my opinion, my own fault. I would say one of the things that, if you were to say, affected me as growing up, was like, I also wanted to befriend everybody because I was moving so much. It was sink or swim when you show up to a new school, right? You either make friends or you have no friends. And so as I grew up, unfortunately, that made me pack on a lot of friends. And so as I got older, whenever I did lean on that second support level, that's when I started to realize, like, oh, people really aren't here for you as much as they say they might be. And so now that I'm at this level in my, where I'm at in my life now, especially as I was like going through my divorce and like my dark period and things like that, that's when I realized, one, who I actually wanted to talk to, which means who who are the people I actually cared about, not just talking to talk because it's like, whatever. And then also the people that actually cared about the absence of my presence. And so, I mean, it was a navigating period for sure. There were some lonely days of being an only child. But and I've talked about this before, is as weird as it sounds, and my mom still thinks it's weird. She's still waiting for the day I like break down. And I'm like, my childhood was horrible. I'm like, actually, I had a really great childhood, and I had a really good support system with my mom and my grandmother. And I brought that into my life now.
Nice. I dig it. I thought that was an important perspective to bring, and I didn't know anything that you were going to say, but I just feel like that was an important perspective to bring into that. Can
I say something real quick?
Yeah. Where you at?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, man, I really appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to open up, Coach Cam. But something hit me when you were talking. I think your father struggles with dealing with disappointment, because I think maybe that's why you don't want to keep that dialogue going, because there's nothing but disappointment. If you're great, you turn out to be a great human, they're disappointment because he had no say in that, he had no impact. If you're a mess, what he didn't do. So he's damned if he does, damned if he don't. So let me keep this going, what we've been doing, which is me be absentee. Sounds like he has some stuff to process, and I'm glad to see that you persevered through, man. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, and I think this is a good segue into therapy. Not that your mom is waiting for you to have therapy, Cam. And there's some things that I put here. I'm not going to share my screen today because I'm not good at doing that here yet. But there's some areas of why, or excuses why, we don't seek therapy. Once we've gone through where the pressure is already built up, the support systems have completely broken down. Therapy typically is like the next result, where we need something different than what we are accustomed to leaning on. And so there were some key areas that I put here. The key reasons for why people give excuses for why they won't go to therapy. The very first one being pride. I almost want to now put it as disappointment, but pride. Pride is I can handle my problems on my own. Therapy is for weak people. I'm not crazy. Our pride. It's a space that we go into that says we don't need therapy. The next area is denial, and pride and denial kind of are like kissing cousins, honestly, because when you are are prideful, you are unwilling to accept the reality of a situation. And so I have denial is I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't have time for therapy. I'm not sure what I would talk about in therapy. Trust me, I've thought about this in the times when I've been sitting in therapy, and I'm like, so what do you want to talk about? And please believe there is something on my mind that I could talk about. But I typically will be like, oh, I don't know. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to? What do you want? Where do you typically start in this conversation? And part of that is a trust aspect, but most of it is just that denial of not really wanting to open up those wounds. And then, another aspect of denial is when we start using vices, whether it be alcohol, drugs, video games, pornography, like whatever it may be. That's another aspect of denial, because what we're trying to do is distract ourselves from the real problem. And so I don't need to go to therapy. Look, I play 98 hours a week in video games. I don't need therapy. Video games are my therapy. Video games are how I decompress, but video games are not my therapeutic conversation or dialogue back and forth. The other area is fear. We're fearful they'll put us on medication. We're fearful because, again, we don't trust therapists. I'm not comfortable talking about my feelings. That's a fear. Because what is that going to mean when I do start talking about them? We're worried about our friends finding out that we're in therapy. I think that's kind of beginning to dissipate a little bit now that therapy is being more spoken about, more openly. But I remember being a kid, like, you don't talk to anybody about you going to therapy. What are you crazy? Like, they gonna be like, oh, you're in the special classes now, huh? Because you go to therapy. Like, that's what it was when I was a kid. Now it's like, you can actually say, I'm going to therapy. Another area is finances. People will say, oh, it's too expensive to go to therapy. I can tell you, if you work for a company that has a benefits package, more than likely, one of those benefits is EPP or EEP. I can't remember what the acronym is. EAP, Employee Assistance Program. That's what it is. I know I have it in my benefits package. Fortunately, I go to therapy without that benefit, but there's been times where I've been dealing with family matters with my oldest son. And it was like, yo, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm at my wit's end. And I've had to call in and say, I need to get a therapist to talk to me and my son, or us individually or us together. I need that help right now. And it cost me nothing. All it cost me was to make the phone call to get the appointment and whatever gas to get to that appointment. That's all that it cost me. So when people say, oh, it's too expensive, I can't afford it, lean on the benefits that you have. You go to work every day and you got a benefits package that provides EAP, lean on that. And then the other aspect is we tend to typically minimize. Oh, I'm not the type of person that goes to therapy. No, my problems are not that serious, right? My problems ain't serious enough. Those are the things we do to begin to minimize our need for therapy. Or my favorite is, it's not that bad. Well, of course it's not that bad. It's not that bad until it is. Then it's too late, because now, trust me, there's been times where I've actually had to go to anger management, court ordered. Hey, you got to go to anger management for the next year, court ordered. I had to do that because I didn't think it was that bad. I didn't think I was that angry. I mean, everybody gets mad, right? Nah. And then they was like, nah, you need to go here regularly for a year. And then after that, after going for a year, there were times where I would still go back to it. And it wasn't that things were that bad. It was just a matter of, these are my refreshers to keep me up to date on the tools that I need, to keep me up to date on the person that I want to be. I want to be a person who has tools to be able to manage anger. I know anger ain't going nowhere. I know anger will always be available. So I might as well start setting myself up with tools that are going to help me process through that. So with that, I do want to go into therapy, in the aspect of therapy, and really begin to talk about, what does therapy look like both in the professional sense and the non-professional sense. Like, how do we get to that therapeutic state?
So I'll go first. So I was introduced to therapy at a young age, because when I was I think 6 or 7 years old, my great grandfather died, and he was like huge part of my life. And my mom being a single mother, you know, she working and doing all this other stuff. So I remember I had a child therapist that would like take me to the park and like hang out with me and like talk about my grandfather with me and stuff like that. So I got introduced to it at a fairly early age. When I was in high school, when my grandmother passed away, same thing. My mom got someone to like a big brother situation thing, like to hang out with me, and like, you know, I got the good side of it because I was a kid, so they like took me to do stuff. I didn't actually have to. I never did the like sit in a chair thing. It was always like they picked me up and took me places, or like we hung out at the park, or like something like that. So once again, you know, only did I ever do like the sit down session stuff when I became an adult. And I was just, and I'm antsy. I'm like, you know, I'm pretty sure I have like undiagnosed ADHD. So I'm sitting there like, all right, man, like what you want to talk about? And I have no problem talking about my stuff, but, you know, I actually, you know, once again, fortunate enough, the way I was raised, I never really had a big stigma about it. I remember my ex-wife, I tried to bring that into the relationship a lot of times. And I was just like, hey, maybe we need to go to like marriage counseling or talk to a therapist. But the way she was raised culturally, you know, she's Filipino, and the way that her, you know, her parents were from, you know, she was first generation. Once again, like you talk about, that was something that they don't do. And so even her as a woman she was not about it. She was extremely reluctant to it. And, you know, and only once she started doing it did she see somewhat of what the value is. And so even after we separated, she continued to go for a short amount of time, which I thought was like a huge win, especially like culturally growing up and not doing that and things of that nature. But I remember her kind of saying those exact statements. She's like, we don't need someone else to talk about our problems with and tell us how to fix our problems. And I'm like, realistically, like sometimes that's why you have like that's why they call it a non-partial third party. But you know, what do I know? So yeah, that's kind of my experience when it comes to therapy.
My my first experience with a therapist is when the thoughts of hurting myself turned into actual actions of hurting myself, and the thought of that kind of pushed me over the edge. I think the thing that scared me the most was confronting myself. Like you named off all those things, Billy, fear, denial, finances. But for me, and I would imagine for most people, the fear of actually confronting yourself, the things that trigger you, the things that you actually need to grow on. But what I noticed about therapy, I don't have a problem talking, right? I have friends. Billy, you are my therapist. You didn't even know it, right? Like I have plenty of people that I can talk to. But what I noticed with therapy is he would charge me, my therapist, he charged me $150 for 50 minutes of his time. And then he gives me an exercise. I'm like, well, shit, Billy will give me an exercise and we'll talk for an hour every time we talk. So I feel like, do I still have a therapist? Yes. I have not utilized him as much because what I've learned is just being more vulnerable and being more open with the people who actually, my brother said it one time when I called him in a dark moment. He was like, Bruce, I'm Team Gatewood. We fuck with you. Like, we love you. And just hearing that from the right people is therapeutic, right? But then what that told me was, well, fuck, Bruce, you've had this here the whole time. You've been not taking advantage of a fucking resource that could save your life type shit. So therapy is good. Dr. Greer is my therapist and I love him. But also my support system, my people are also my therapy. So
yeah, I think that's that again brings up what we went through this weekend, Bruce, with our wives. Like my wife and I were having a conversation, we were talking, and we kind of reached this impasse. And like you said, Coach Cam, you know, we got to get a third party involved. That's non-biased, just a third party. And so because the conversation was about a message I had sent to Bruce, I call Bruce and I'm like, hey, Bruce, how did you interpret this message that I sent to you? And he interpreted it exactly the way I thought he would have interpreted it because we're both guys. But in listening to Bruce's wife, because she was on this conversation as well, it's like she interpreted it, not that it was a negative message, but she interpreted it similarly to how my wife would have interpreted it. And in that conversation and that dialogue, a couple's dialogue back and forth, like, hey, we're really a couple and we really actually do argue and we really do go through things. And to hear somebody else saying, hey, we really are a couple, and the person who you think you're with that you might think is crazy right now, I'm with the same type of person right now. And the person that they think that you are, where they think you're crazy right now, they're with the same type of person. So to see outside of the cocoon or outside of the bubble of your relationship and see that, hey, there's another relationship in the world out of the billions of people who would think there's another relationship in the world that is similar to the relationship that you have with your partner. And to be able to have that conversation. And the thing is that after we got, I don't even, I think we talked for maybe 30 minutes or so, but after we got off that conversation, I felt the tension in the conversation that my wife and I were having like subside and get to this place where it was like, okay, now we can actually talk and work on what we want to work on or what we want to work through. We can actually work through that now. Whereas when we talk about therapy, if I have to schedule an appointment with a therapist, okay, so now we got to table this conversation on Sunday and talk about it on Thursday when you're probably going to talk about it 7 more times between Sunday and Thursday because you're going to play it in your head over and over again. All of a sudden now that tension is released and we're not scheduling an appointment. Now, will we still do therapy? Sure, we'll still do therapy because I think therapy is a good practice to have. But outside of having to go to a professional therapist, outside of having to find out somebody that fits or somebody that doesn't fit, we were able to lean on that resource. Just an everyday couple. Like, I don't want to talk to somebody whose marriage is, oh, well, your marriage is perfect and how did you do it? Because honestly, when you sit and you hear about perfect marriages and how did you do it, typically somebody had to ignore a lot of shit. Like, that's how you did it. and my ability to ignore stuff is not that good. So I'll leave it at that, but definitely interested in hearing everybody else's thoughts in regards to therapy.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, can you guys hear me? Okay, I hear some feedback. Uh, I think my aversion for therapy historically has just ran pretty deep, right? I had back surgery 8 years ago, and I didn't even want to go to physical therapy. It's not. I don't think it's pride. I think it's fear. I think there is a level of vulnerability that someone in therapy has to go through to get value out of that session that, I don't know that. I mean, I just don't know that I can be as vulnerable as I need to be to benefit from professional therapy, right? And so, I mean, it's something I think about often. It's something I think about today that I should reach out to EAP and have a conversation with someone to get something set up. But it's just historically, like in our family, Billy, a lot of the things that most of us kind of are exposed to, kind of embraced. Generations before us didn't embrace that. I didn't learn a lot of this stuff from my parents. Coach Cam, kudos to your mom, man, because you walked out of that, your childhood with some nuggets and some gems and some direction and some of the things that I didn't, and I had a two parent home, right? So I mean, it's something certainly that I continue to think about, something that I probably will do at some point. I understand that even in like, it's not therapy, but my kids teach me a lot, right? My youngest told me one day, she said, I told her something and she started crying. And I'm like, Bryn, what's the matter? She said, I don't like your daddy voice. And I'm like, I can't talk to her like my dad talked to me, right? And so now I had to switch up. Some of the things the kids go through that we didn't go through, that I didn't understand, is a form of therapy for me, because now I have to deal into these situations, whether they're emotional, and whatnot, to try to support them. So I'll get there. I mean, I know that I can certainly benefit from some professional intervention. Thankfully, Brother Bruce, you're good. I know we've all dealt with depression. We've all dealt with thoughts of uh, you know um, the harming ourselves or whatnot. But thankfully, you kind of overcame that. But uh, something that's on my radar. I'm just not quite there yet.
So I think that you guys can hear me, right? I was having technical issues, everything. I'm on the phone now. Anyway, um, so I did couples therapy with my wife, and it's funny because when you do that, hopefully you get someone that's impartial, and they don't. But I sat and I just saw how it was all going, right? And from that point, I was like, okay, I have this disposition now, and ask my guys, I read people very well. Like I may not say nothing to you, but I'm sitting and reading everything you putting out. And so the guy, he was like clearly pro woman, right? And so and I was like, man, I know I ain't doing all of this wrong. And, and it was just like every single you did. I was like, wait, what is going on here? Can I even get? Wait a second, I mean, isn't it supposed to be? So I saw that. I've experienced that. Not to say that that's how obviously how all therapists do or anything like that. Um, but on a personal note, I haven't really delved into that, and I think, like Brian said, I know what's going to come out of it because I know what's really there. See, I'm smart enough. I minored in psychology in college, right? So I know what's there. Like I know the problem. It's not even one of those where I don't really know what I'll find. No, I know what I'll find. I'm gonna find a beaten and battered little boy, right? And I have to deal with that person and try to figure out right how to cope with that. And then once you open up a couple of those things, that subconscious starts to, it's like file cabinets in your mind, right? There's all these things that you locked inside of a back room, right? And you put 3 locks or 4 padlocks on it, and now those locks are open, and those files start coming out, and you're like, oh, this stuff that I even forgot about, right? Because sometimes they hypnotize you, and you get into other rights. So there's all these. I know it's there, and I know it's necessary. Um, I'll say that it's something that I definitely want to dive into because I don't feel you could be, as a father. I'll say this: I don't think you could be fully cognizant or fully present until you've healed from what your parents have done to you, right? Because there's a piece of you that's still a little kid dealing with whatever it is. I mean, and I'm speaking that from personal experience. I know that, like, man, there's so that whole like the whole growing up aspect has like literally followed me in good or bad ways, right? Because I'm the type of person I took the negative and I ate off of that, right? So like in sports, when I'm mad or stuff's going on in the house, right, I go score 40 points in a basketball game, and everybody's like, "Dang, you killing it!" But I know where that stuff really came from, right? Or in football, I'm gonna just light somebody up, right? I'm just literally be cleat somebody, and I'm like, "Oh, that feels so good." Right. And there's all these things and all these outlets. And like I said, the transition of the problem is that that was somewhat therapeutic when we were younger. But as you get older and you can't do those things anymore, now the weight of that stuff, you got to try to find it. And I think that's where a whole lot of vices and things come from: the drugs, the pornography, all of these extracurricular things that you have to do because you don't have those outlets like that anymore. Physically, you may not be able to do those things. And so for me, it's just been what I ended up doing is turning it into a workaholic. Previous to me having my financial agency and us running that organization, I was a chemical engineer, right? So I would just pour all myself into work, right? And so that's dangerous too because then that gets tied to your identity, right? And so then when you're not doing that work, or maybe you mess up something at work, now you feel like it's an attack against your character. So there's all these different things that just come into it. No therapy is 100% needed. I love it. I love the fact that Cam said that his mom, that she did that and she initiated that. So many things that a lot of people, a lot of us, and a lot of people that just don't get to have, right? But there's no excuses. We get older because, like you said, you got ERP, you got just trying to get into some type of counseling. There's church counseling, right? They probably have some therapists that are there that could help you, and you could utilize that. So, yeah, I think therapy is 100% needed, and yeah, it's a good thing, and I'm headed that way. I've done it in one aspect, so now it's just on the personal aspect.
Yeah, I would say I can definitely agree with a lot of what Rico said, and even what definitely shouts out to Cam's mom for as a parent being aware enough to understand the value and the importance of therapy. And I say that, number one, being a parent. Number two, now I'm being older, my perspective on therapy has changed, because the first time that I experienced it, I was 5'6", where my mom, who was also a single parent, took me into therapy, and the end result was, or one of the end results or suggested results was, oh, well, he just needs to be put on Ritalin, right? So we're talking late 80s, early 90s. And so for me, still, even being a young kid, understanding that, like, my view on a therapist took me back to that moment. So even as an adult, it took me back to that childhood trauma. So even now, being an adult, where if my wife mentions, hey, let's do couples therapy, because I have so much hurt and so much just everything inside that I haven't dealt with myself, to now being at a point where it's, we're talking growth. Like, when I say my perspective on therapy changes, that's more of a recent thing. Like, if I'm a lot more open to it, because I understand the value of it. And to me, like, sessions like this, being in the men's circle, this is therapeutic to me, right? I don't have to pay for this, right? But you guys, as I sit on this platform, I'm being poured into, right? I'm sitting here taking notes while still being able to provide just as much value. And in addition with that, I look at it from a parent standpoint, and being a leader of my home. Like, if I can't express to my kids the value of therapy, how important it is, how important having a men's circle or a group of, or a community, if I'm not leading by example, like, what am I doing? Right. And so, I sat here quiet on, this is probably one of the first calls I've ever been this quiet on, but again, it was just like, this is all therapy to me, because now I have some deeper questions for myself to ask, and be able to reach back to my support system and be like, listen, not only did I take this away, but this is how I'm feeling with this. Right. And so I appreciate the conversation on therapy, because yet again, this is another topic where, as men, we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, at all.
Yeah.
So
Thank y'all for sharing. I'll go ahead. If you want to go ahead first, Coach Cam, go ahead, man.
I was gonna say real quick, and one of the things as we talk about, like, being parents, is like keeping the lessons we learned, like, help our kids learn them as well. When I went through my divorce, I in turn also got a counselor for my kids to talk to. And it wasn't a sit down thing either. It was, they took them to the duck pond on base, and they did walks with them, and just like let them know it's okay. Like, if you're frustrated or you're not feeling the situation, or you don't like going back and forth between mom and dad's house and stuff like that. So now even my children, have a positive view of when it comes to, speaking to somebody about their feelings who's not mom or dad, or a family member, or or like one of their child friends or parents' friend. And so, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, because I have two different portions of my life where I felt about therapy very differently. The household I grew up in, maybe I'll describe it a little bit to y'all, and maybe y'all understand. You never really talked about your issues, or you never really addressed anything that came up. My mom would whoop my ass, come back in about an hour and a half, be like, hey, you gonna eat dinner? Come out and eat dinner, or what? Like, nothing just happened. You know what I mean? Like, let's act like that didn't happen, and let's get over it, right? What really spawned my thing with therapy was my oldest daughter. And really, when I say that, it was my wife, and I'll explain. My daughter's 22 now. When she was 15, she came in the house, she smelled like weed, and I flipped out on her. She might as well have been, one of the pilots that hit the Twin Towers, the way I came at her. I came at her with vengeance, because not if you partake in it, then that's on you. But I never really, that's not something I've ever subscribed to. I never really subscribed to the escapism. If you need to take a substance to escape your reality, why not just work on changing your reality? I'm very logical and pragmatic like that. So always seen that as like, okay, how long are you going to delay dealing with your shit? Right. But she knew how I felt about that. So I took it as betrayal and I really lashed out at her. What that caused is it caused a divide in us where we weren't talking. It was probably like the lowest 6 months I've ever had. And I've been Afghanistan, Iraq. I've done the lowest I've ever been was that 6 months. And my wife says, "Man, I hate seeing you like this. You're not who you are." She was like, "Why don't you go to therapy? Take her to therapy. Just set the appointment and pick her up from school and take her one day. She can't. She's gonna be at school. You can't. You know, she can't stop you from coming up to the school, and you're still her dad." And so we went to therapy, and what I discovered in therapy is if you could, and the therapist, she gave me some things at the end, which I'll go over now, and it will make sense when I go on with the story. She says, do you need to discover what's going on with you? Do you need to confront what's going on with you? Do you need to process those things, or do you need to adjust, or is it a mixture of all of them? Is pretty much what she said, how to assess these things. And I actually took those principles that she taught me and my daughter, and I am preventative with those things now, as opposed to waiting for those to get to a point to where I have to spring into action and go to therapy. So in the therapy sessions with my daughter, what I realized, and Brian, you said something in the beginning. I've been waiting like an hour to say what I'm about to say based off what you said. She had some resentment about, because she's the oldest, and then my youngest at the time, he was 5. She was seeing a disparity about how she was brought up and as opposed to how they were being brought up, the younger ones. And the therapist shared with me in our therapy session, she shared with my daughter too, which I thought she was going to be pro my daughter. I went in there falling on the sword. Hey, look, I know I was really tough. You got real drill sergeant dad. I know. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, you were the first kid, so you're the one I got all my mistakes out the way with. And the therapist actually turned out to be pro both of us. So what she told my daughter is something profound, Brian, that's going to play into what we're talking about, which is no matter what, even if you have the same mom and dad and you have 4 kids, none of them ever really had the same parents. And that's because the first one was, when you had the first one, you were probably younger, more chaotic time in your life. They dealt with the younger, more immature, chaotic version of their dad. As you get older in life, more established, more comfortable, the younger ones benefit from the stability and the lessons learned from being as rugged. So you never really have the same parents, even if you have the same parents, unless they're twins, I guess. But just taking what she said, and best decision I ever made in my life, because it took that 6 months was bad. But if I conformed to what my family's history would have been, that would have been 2 years. And we would have never really got better. We would have just let it go. And letting it go is a great song for Disney to make money off of, but it's not really a principle to live your life on. Because just because you let go don't mean something let go of you. And that's my takeaways from therapy. And I feel like the more I have these men's circles, the more I'm like a cheerleader for my wife. My wife's she's been like a real agent of change for me that's helped me see things. Because when she brought it up the first time, I was like, I poo-pooed it, because I told her, I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to somebody that I'm paying. They're going to tell me something based off what they heard. I already know what the issues are. And what the therapist actually taught me was, if you can have these conversations free of defensiveness, you will progress really fast and you'll need therapy a lot sooner. If you could stop feeling the need to defend your actions and just acknowledge, address, process those actions, you'll be in a much better place. And it did me wonders. I haven't needed it since. Well, maybe I have. I don't know. But I haven't been in that place where it felt critical ever since. And I take a lot of those principles and I apply them to my family now. I have this, like some of the things that we talk about in the men's circle, I've applied to my family. It's been great. I have conversations with my kids. I ask them, what am I doing right? And what do you feel you're needing? What am I not giving you that you need? And the answers to those questions, man, you think the kids would tell you some crazy shit, man. They don't. Like, my son was like, what I like about you is you teach me accountability. And when I'm lacking, he's like, I don't really feel like I'm lacking anything. And I was shocked. He's 12 or 11. He just turned 11 yesterday. I thought for sure he was going to start listing out Nintendo Switch games and all this stuff because kids at that age don't think that way. But he actually, the conversations that stuff like this and the things I've learned going through that therapy session, those sessions really help shape my relationships and enrich them to where, is it all smooth sailing? No. But the storms are manageable. And instead of acting like they never happened, you could reflect on what happened, adjust and process and move forward. And that's really what this stuff taught me. I know I went really long. I'm sorry, Billy.
No, you're good. We're actually in overtime right now. But I think it's important to mention because a lot of people, when it comes to therapy, there's a couple of thought processes behind when we go. Number one, we think it's going to be instant. I'm going to go, I'm going to talk about it, and it's going to be instant, and I'm going to feel a hell of a lot better. And I'm be honest, my son and I went through therapy. We've been going through therapy together, mainly him, but I joined in on a couple of his sessions with him and his therapist. And I remember having a conversation with my wife, and I was like, this is exhausting. Like, to unpack and rehash and all these different things, it takes a lot of energy. And so if you go into therapy thinking it's going to be a one done, hit it and quit it, that's not going to be your experience, I can tell you. Because even the residual effects of therapy, sometimes it may take like a week or two to hit you, and you're like, dang, that's what it was. I remember I was doing some deep reflection one time about why I'm such an independent person. And by the time I was done reflecting all the way back, it went all the way back to like being that child where I was 16 years old, had just got my license. My parents told me, hey, I was going to like a junior prom, and it's like an hour and a half away from Sacramento. And I was asking my parents, hey, can you guys rent me a car so I could drive? I got my license, I'm trying to drive. And they were like, nah. They said, but if you find someone to rent you a car, you can drive. And me being resourceful, I found someone to rent me a car because you ain't said nothing but a word. And so my parents had to come back and say, we didn't think you were going to find somebody to rent you a car, so you can't drive. And I held on to that until like 38, 39 years old. In my mind, it was, see, people will say they support you and they don't really even believe in you. And that's the lesson I took from that and kept all the way to 39. It wasn't until 39-year-old Billy went back to 16-year-old Billy and said, hey, my mom turned 40 when I turned 18. So she would have been 38 years old. She'd have been almost a year younger than I was when I'm reflecting back on this moment. And I'm thinking of myself as a 38-year-old parent, how much I didn't know and how much I messed up with my own kids and continue to mess up with my own kids. And I said, your parents, at the end of the day, they were afraid you were going to get hurt driving an hour and a half away as a new driver. They didn't know how to simply tell you that. And so in order to try to not disappoint you, that disappointment word, they gave you what they thought was an impossible task, and you succeeded. And then they had to decide as young parents whether or not they were going to let you go forward with what they thought you wouldn't be able to accomplish and risk your life, or tell you that you couldn't do it. And they chose to tell you that you couldn't do it. It was never that they didn't believe in you. That wasn't the lesson that you were supposed to take. You weren't supposed to take the lesson of, I now need to be independent. I got to do it all by myself, and I can't expect anybody to believe in me because I got to do it. Take the lesson that your parents were young. They were just as stupid as parents are when they don't know what they're doing. Like, I'm sure I'm just as stupid as a parent sometimes, but that's who they are and that's who they were. And to take that lesson and feel like you have to be this independent force from here on out is going to eventually lead to your detriment. So that's the first thing. Therapy's not going to work. It's not a one and done. It's not a silver bullet. And honestly, sometimes the therapist, so like you said, Rico, going to a therapist and being like, "Hey, yo, like I already smell what you laying down," and that, no, I'm not, I'm not with that. When I went to anger management the first time, I went to anger management, and this person was just like, "You're angry," blah 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 blah. I was like, I don't think this is the place for me. And I left and I went to a new place. And the new place was more aligned with what I needed from a therapeutical perspective. So never be afraid to say, like, hey, yo, this therapist didn't work. Never be afraid to fire a therapist if you don't feel like it's working and move to another therapist. Because I promise you, just like you find your tribe of people and your friends that you connect with and you have deep relationships with, you can find a therapist through the same effort.
Billy, hold on. I want to add on that. One of the best things that one of my brothers told me on my search for therapy or for a therapist, because my first therapist was terrible, bro. Like my first therapist almost shut it all the way down. I'll never do it again type shit. But my homeboy said something. He said, when you picking your therapist, when you're speaking to prospective therapists, tell them what you need from them. Don't ask what they have to offer. No. Tell them directly what you need from them. And how they answer that question will give you a lot of insight to who you're dealing with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lastly, I think when it comes to therapy is you got to be open. Like, and Brian, I hear you when you're like, I'm hesitant because I kind of lightweight know what I'm going to find there. And I don't know if I'm ready to deal with that. Um, Therapy requires vulnerability. And when you're under pressure, when you feel like there's a lack of support, it's really hard to get to the therapy aspect because that means I now have to concede that there are some areas of weakness that need to be addressed, that need to be reinforced. Like mental health, when your mental health is off, I don't care if you don't ever go to therapy, there's an area of weakness because all it takes is the right trigger to send you down the wrong road. And so it's going to require openness, and that openness requires courage to face what you're going to find because you know without a shadow of a doubt what's there. And then courage also to be willing to address those issues as they arise. Um, that's going to be my closing thought. I'll give everybody a chance to do closing thoughts, and then we'll wrap with the key takeaways.
I'll go. I'll go. I like to talk. My closing thoughts are, I would say, not all pressure is bad pressure. Not all pressure is needed pressure. Not all support is good support. And not all therapy is bad, right? These are the things that I'm gleaning from the things that you guys have all said, and just I would say be cognizant of the person you want to be in any pursuit, and especially in the pursuit of growth, especially in this pursuit of whatever manhood is or is whatever it's supposed to look like in your eyes. Make sure you're moving for you. Make sure you're moving based on who you want to be. Make sure the people that you're keeping around you and in your circle align with who you want to be and who you want to be around, who you want to become, right? And also, especially because we're all fathers, your kids are always watching. My children, they hear the conversations that you and I have, Billy. They hear the conversations that I have with my other brothers. They hear this. So make sure that we're not contaminating, we're not bleeding on them too much with our pride, with our fears, with our ego, with all the things that our parents did or didn't do that held us back. Just make sure that we're not doing that to the ones that come after us.
What you got, Brian?
So, I mean, first of all, I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to even, talk about some topics that I generally don't have an opportunity to talk about. So this is definitely different. It actually, and I was serious when I said when I read your email, Billy, it gave me a little anxiety. But one of the things that I'm taking away from this is, which I've already known, I've always known, right? I still need and want to work on me. Even though, just like I told you guys, like I told my sister, I make it look easy, but it's not easy. It's a chore for me daily to stay in a lane of positivity, to stay in that lane of that person I want to be. It's easy to deviate from that, right? I truly believe my daughters are heaven sent because, like I said, that relationship with my sons versus me being cognizant of the needs of my girls that are different. I mean, I say they're different than my sons, uh, but they're the same. At when I was younger, I didn't know better, right? And I didn't think they needed the things that I was able to afford my daughters emotionally. But they're heaven sent. I tell you that I don't know if I would be the person I am if I had a house full of boys. Uh, I just don't know. I mean, and my son, I remember when my daughter-in-law had her first baby, he wanted a boy, and I said no. I said no. I said, number one, you were only child for 21 years. And I said, number two, you in law enforcement. I said, you will destroy a boy. And thankfully, he came into the house one day and put his head on my shoulder. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Dad, it's a girl." And I was like, "Yes, yes." But I see the impact she's had on him, right? And so, which is great. He's a great father. But I took a lot of nuggets from each of you. Some of you I've seen on the circle before. Some of you I've seen on other platforms that my cousins recommended. But like I said, I think I got more value out of this than I gave. So I'm indebted to Billy for keeping me in mind when he needs some folks to come on and just kind of share experiences or impart some knowledge or whatnot. But I truly do appreciate it.
Ro, Brian, Bruce, Tim, Cam, and Rico. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to be on this panel. I mean, like I said, I remain a student of life, and so being able to, again, have a seat at this table, is absolutely phenomenal, and to be able to talk about topics that I've never talked about in any space, and to be able to have the opportunity to remain vulnerable, to remain transparent, and remain open to listening to some of the nuggets that you guys give, to be able to really take in and be able to do a deeper dive. To me, that's again, this platform is super valuable, and I'm really grateful. Not only grateful, but I'm glad that you executed on the vision. And thank you for the invite, brother.
So first off, tell my girl Olivia I said what's up. Hi. Net's over here laughing in the background. So no, this was great, man. I appreciate it. This is funny. This is something I talked to Glenn about the other day. Is if there was anything like you kind of asked me about earlier, is what I missed out on life. As I got older, I did not have a circle like this to discuss things. I may have had singular people, but I never had like a group of other men having this type of conversation in this type of environment. We're all real, uncut. And so I truly appreciate the opportunity. And it was great to kind of hear perspectives from all walks of life.
Absolutely. Tim, Rico, one or the other? Rico?
Oh, I'll go.
Go ahead.
Sorry. My takeaways, man, is this, again, another home run for the men's circle. It's funny because I find myself like that crackhead on Menace. I'm like, where's that email from Billy? What's the topic this week? And I was looking last Sunday. I was like, I don't see no email. He was about to get a call from me yesterday until I seen the email pop up. these are great because what I feel I get from these is I get more application of thoughts that are already in my head. It gets me to actually take action as opposed to, oh, that's a great idea someday. And that's really helped me in a really good time in my life. My takeaways from this specific section, I know you're going to go over your takeaways, but my final thoughts are, I think you said it, Bruce, not all pressure is bad pressure, but sometimes you got to understand, when you hit your threshold, getting to know that threshold is important because you'll just keep taking on and taking on and taking on until, like the Atlas analogy earlier, you collapse underneath the pressure because nobody could sustain that for very long. And then the takeaways from everybody's experiences and really getting a chance to deep dive. And it's funny, Billy, you said something about your parents. I had that awakening probably 7-8 years ago. My mom had a high school education level of 4th grade. She had a dropout. She's 1 in 19. Worked in the tomato fields. She had to help support her family. My dad technically dropped out in 11th grade, but he stopped going way before that. So I had 2 uneducated people doing what best they could. And when I started looking at it from their perspective, like, what are they, it really changed the narrative that I had. Because when I was growing up, I used to take mental notes as when I'm a parent, I'm in this situation, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it this way. And that worked and it applied to my life. But the root of that was out of rebellion and negativity when it should have been just out of understanding and learning. And I've been able to make that adjustment. And that is the process. Do you know what you're dealing with? Are you willing to acknowledge? And do you have somebody to hear what you're dealing with? Then are you ready to process and adjust? That's kind of my takeaways from this whole thing is take that moment to release the pressure or it will release on you. So that's my final thoughts.
Yeah, just to keep it super simple, I'm just super appreciative of being here. Everybody's already summed it up. I don't have anything else to say. Everybody else has killed it. So just appreciative.
That's the benefit of going first. You got to go first. Be first out. Really quick, Tim, on what you said as far as I think a lot of us take the approach of maybe we don't need therapy because we're just doing the opposite of what our parents screwed up on, right? Like, well, I'm gonna just do it different than what they did. I'm gonna be present in my kid's life. I'm not gonna yell at my kids. I'm going to explain things to my kids and not just say because I said so. Like that strategy works really, really well in the beginning because there's lots of things that you can look at as examples of what not to do. But what happens when you weren't given an example for a situation that you're in? You haven't practiced critical thinking. And that's where you begin to run into the issues of now, not only do I not know what to do, but I don't have anything to bounce it off of as far as something that's negative. And more than likely, you're going because you've been focused on avoiding negative reactions or negative actions, you're probably going to pick a negative action out of that random critical thinking hat of yours. Like for me, it's yelling. Like my dad used to yell at me, and I was like, I'm never going to do that. And then when I got past the parts where my dad was yelling at me for my room's dirty and all these different things, and then you experience something like your kid smoking weed. Now you're cussing your kid out. Like, like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that. I was only prepared for like your room being dirty. What the hell? Why? Like I could have stayed calm there, but you're in a new space that I'm not accustomed to. And so I just wanted to point that out. Like being able to look at somebody's negative actions is not critical thinking. That's just opposite parakeeting. That's all that is. And you have to get to a space. I don't like to tell people what they have to do. I recommend getting to a space where you move beyond parakeeting or opposite parakeeting, and you start moving into critical thinking about who you want to be and how you want that to come across. So Brian, when you said the dad voice, oh man, if I throw the dad voice on a basketball court, people are like, are you a cop? No, I'm just a dad, and that's the voice that I'm using. That's why you guys are responding to it. With that, let's jump in really quick with these quick takeaways. Takeaway number 1 from tonight was don't sell your future for peace in the present. Tim, that came from you. Don't mortgage your present pressures. Take on additional present pressures that you think you can pay for down the road. Typically doesn't work out eventually. Number two is there's a difference between internal and external pressure. Cam, that came from you. There is a difference in regards to what we feel. Are we allowing the external perception of what's happening on the outside to create the pressure, or is it truly coming from a story that we're telling ourselves? And honestly, we're great at telling stories, but sometimes we're not accurate at telling stories. Takeaway number three is carve out intentional time to set boundaries. Glenn, that came from you in regards to how do you create that separation between the drama and the pressure that's coming in. You have to set out some intentional time to set boundaries. If you don't know what your boundaries are, I promise you people will push straight through what you don't know. And then by the time you look up, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I have this boundary here. It's never too late to set a boundary. But by the time you look up, you're like, oh, they already, the zombie apocalypse is already in the front yard. Like the fence done failed already. It's too late. So that's takeaway number three. Takeaway number four was no one wants to be disappointed, but it's okay to be disappointed sometimes. The sheer act of allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to be disappointed is going to pay extreme dividends, especially what we don't take into consideration in those moments where we are not disappointed. We put ourselves out there. We offer that olive branch. We're out there on a limb, and we find out that actually there's people there to catch us. There's people there to love us. There's people there who are supportive of us. So that's takeaway number four. Takeaway number five is don't be afraid to try different therapists. Look, it's not a one size fits all. Some people's flavors for therapy don't work for me. Like, I don't want to go through different psychology methodologies. I just want to have an organic conversation. If you can't have an organic conversation and there's some way you think you need to steer it, that's not going to work for me. So I need to try a different therapist. It's never, I treat therapy like I treat marriage. Marriage has worked for decades, generations. It is never marriage that is the problem. It is the people within the marriage that create the problem for marriage. And the similar aspect can be said about therapy. Therapy has been around. Wise counsel has been around for generations and generations. It is not the therapy that is the issue. It is the people that are involved in the therapy that are the issue. And it's about finding the right people that you can be involved with so that that is not an issue for your therapeutic experience. And then lastly, takeaway number six, therapy is not always done with professionals. It's done in communities. It's done in sometimes just like Tim said, flying out and just getting away. It's done in so many different ways. So don't feel like you have to sit down on the couch. Cam, I love the fact that your mom had you with therapists that were taking you to the duck pond. Like they're like, you went to the duck pond. That's not therapy. No, that is therapeutic. And the reality is that I wish as a child who had to go to funerals and experience people grieving, I wish I had that someone for me that could say, hey, let's talk about what you liked about the person who passed away. Let's talk about what you didn't like. Let's talk about how you're feeling. I didn't have that. And in fact, it would be like receptions after and then fights during the reception. So, but at the end of the day, therapy is not always done with professionals. But I do think that therapy should be done with people that you trust and that you know that they love and they care about you. And that's really all that I have for tonight. As always, it's a pleasure having all of you men on the men's circle. I know we went overtime today, but I honestly kind of felt like we were going to go in overtime because of therapy being in. If I didn't involve therapy, we wouldn't have went overtime. But once you say therapy, you're going to have a little more time on your hands. I definitely appreciate all your vulnerability. What's going on, brother Moses? I appreciate for those who were live in the chat, just jumping in and giving their gems as well. And as always, don't let this be the end. Don't let this conversation be the end of it. Continue to take this out into the world. Continue to invite other men to the men's circle. Every other Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are here. And maybe we'll talk about opening it up for somebody to come up from the live chat for the next session. But other than that, as always, Well, I'm sorry, Glenn or Coach Cam. I'll give it to Glenn because Glenn knows what he's doing here. Cam, you might have to do this eventually. There is some more content coming up, and actually, there was some additional content released today. I'm just trying to get your overlay. I apologize. Here you go. Bam. There it is. There it is.
Bro, always appreciate you, man. Guys, the Elder Perspective is a podcast that Cam and I do. Topics that we talk about is life, love, and leadership. 3 very essential topics. On that platform, we're just simply providing value. So today we just dropped episode 30. So every Tuesday we drop an episode. So episode 30 just dropped today. Cam and I had a great conversation. So check it out. You can go on, find it on all podcast platforms, the L3 Perspective.
Appreciate that. And then the next time that you'll be able to see me on the first row is tomorrow for the Wednesday Word. That's going to be on micro pressure. I knew that pressure was such a big conversation that I was like, I'm going to still stick on pressure on this Wednesday Word. That will be tomorrow at, I don't forgot the time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But that will be tomorrow's Wednesday Word. Other than that, as always, if you like this video, please share it. If you share it, please like it. We love engaging with you guys in the live chat, and we're happy to engage with you in the comments for the first 7 days that the content is up. After that, we move on to new content. But until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on the first row.